Brett Schilke is the Director of Impact of Singularity University, leading initiatives that connect, support, and celebrate a global ecosystem in over 100 countries to address the greatest challenges of humanity. He regularly speaks across the world about the future of knowledge, of generational tendencies, and the construction of communities in action. Brett has spent several years in international development as director of an NGO of education and civil society. He has been professor at a private university in Russia and has published investigations about the evolution of human psychology through periods of social change. As co-founder and CEO of the company for educational development called ADIACO, Brett has launched City X Project, a program of innovation and conflict resolution for kids utilized in over 75 countries. He has also designed experiences of learning focused on the future of GEMS education, the Congress of the United States, and for the Ministry of Education of United Arab Emirates. He is Director of Impact of the prestigious Singularity University. Brett, we are so honored to welcome you today on stage. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. Hola, buenas tardes. That's the only Spanish you're getting from me. I'm sorry. I'm really excited to be here, and I'm really excited to talk to you today about the future, right? That's really what we're here to talk about. So this morning, we learned a lot about innovation. We learned a lot about learning. We learned about open platforms to change governance, all of these different things that can really help our minds change a little about the way that we think about the world we're moving into. So the thing is, to talk about the future, first I'd like to get a little bit of a pulse check from our audience. I'm curious how you feel about the future. Are you an optimist about the future? Are you a pessimist about the future? Are you sort of somewhere in the middle, maybe a little undecided about the future? So we'll just do a simple show of hands. Raise your hand if you are an optimist about the future. Yeah. Whew, all right. Raise your hand if you're a pessimist. Don't be shy. There must be one. Yeah? Be proud. It's okay. Okay, were there any others? A few of you are pessimists about the future, all right? See, and now you're like, oh, they're cool. I want to be too. Anybody undecided? Anybody somewhere in the middle? Okay, so I'd like to hear from one of the people who enthusiastically raised your hand and said, I'm an optimist. Tell me why. So someone, raise your hand again if you're an optimist. I don't remember who was. Okay, right here in the blue shirt. Could you tell us why you're an optimist about the future? No, don't look behind you, it's you. Yeah. Can you tell us why you are an optimist about the future? So it's a future of ideas, right? There's just endless possibility, right? Okay, so from a pessimist, there were only two, so there's not much to pick from. Why are you pessimistic about the future?
Well, I think we are offering too much resistance to the future.
Tell me more about that.
We need more changes, and we are too slow.
Okay, so we need more change, and we're actually moving too slowly. It's a really interesting perspective. I think that the future can be a divisive topic. It can be something that people feel really strongly about. And luckily, today, we are apparently in a room of complete optimists, which is really exciting because I think you're much less likely to boo me when I give my talk. But I think there's an opportunity in this future to convert our pessimists, to get them thinking in a new way, and to really realize that the future is, in fact, full of lots of different opportunities. So, to do that today, first I have to practice my magician skills. I practiced for 2 minutes over lunch. There we go, okay. So to start today, I just want to tell you a story about this place. So this is Earth. This is home to you, it's home to me, and it's home to 7.5 billion of our closest friends. And this Earth is one that is full of lots of challenges. We know these challenges very well. Everything from energy, environment, water, and food to governance, security, and prosperity. In fact, most everybody in this room is one of these 7.5 billion people actually working on the front lines of these challenges, actually working to solve them. And there's something interesting there, is that we have rooms full of people working to solve these challenges. And it's because there's something really unique about humans. There's something unique that we feel compelled to solve all of our problems. And we are always looking for the things that can do that. Since the time of the ancient Greeks, when the Greek goddess Panacea gave rise to the term we use today, panacea, for a cure-all, right? Something that will cure all of the problems that we face on our planet. Every illness we have, every issue that we need to tackle. And if you look throughout time, there have been even more of these panaceas that have been out there. So maybe it was Panacea and her potion to the ancient Greeks, or if it's the red sap of the elephant tree to the Cahuilla Indians in California, or it's ginseng in traditional Chinese medicine. We are always compelled to find these magical cures. And today, I will have a moment of self-awareness. I am standing here on this stage because I live in Silicon Valley, a place that believes technology is today's panacea. That technology is the cure-all for our world. Now, we could have a very, very healthy debate about that, or possibly unhealthy debate, depending, but we're not going to get into that. What I'd rather explain is why. I'd like to explain why technology has positioned itself today as an extremely powerful force for our future. So to do that, I need to introduce you to this guy. This is Gordon Moore. Pardon me. Gordon Moore is a co-founder of Intel. And in 1965, Gordon Moore recognized something about the pace of change of technology. He saw that roughly every 18 months, the price performance of technology doubled. So this means every 18 months, the integrated circuit, in his case, was twice as powerful for half the price. That rate of change has continued, mostly consistent to this day. So, in very simple terms, when we plot awesomeness over time, it looks like this. This is an exponential growth curve. You all remember math? I see you all shaking your heads. Yes, 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 yes. I was in math class. Well, this is where we are today. We are at this point of the curve that's called the knee of the curve, and it is when things start to get a little bit crazy. When the world around us maybe isn't exactly what we expect. When that pace of change of technology gets so fast. Because in exponential growth, those first few steps don't feel that ridiculous. They're pretty flat, right? 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, but then you really start that doubling trend, and the pace is something that we actually struggle to comprehend. So in technology, this trend is driven by 4 different things, and they're right here. So we have digitization, dematerialization, demonetization, and democratization. Pretty much any technology that we look at in our world that is tracking one of these exponential growth curves is going through these 4 stages. And to demonstrate that, I have this video. You know, we see the average desktop from maybe the mid-'80s to late '80s, and then gradually things start to change as this technology develops. And we see that computer gets smaller, and we see a fax machine disappear. And we see that Rolodex somehow gets absorbed into another piece of technology, and the dictionary disappears, and all of these things are condensed and modified, and eventually they're all just a bunch of apps. And this is that process of those Ds in action. So this video actually tracks technology development through about 2014. And if we push that just a couple years farther down the curve, you would know that the computer itself might disappear, and it would just be that smartphone sitting on the desk. My favorite thing here is actually when the car keys disappear, and they turn into the Uber app. But as a matter of fact, standing here on this stage in El Salvador, I can pull out my phone and I can control my car parked at my house in California. I could make the horn go, I could make the alarm go off, scare my neighbors, anything I want. So we're living in this world that has been dematerialized, right? The things that once were objects no longer are. They are digitized. What was once a physical thing, think about a photograph, is now digits. It's ones and zeros. It's something that lives inside of a device. They're demonetized, where people suddenly people are suddenly able to have access to all of these things for free. And because of that additional access, because things are free, there's democratization, where everybody can hold this right in their pockets. This trend is not exclusive, though, to the technology we see in our homes and on our desks. There are lots of different categories of exponentially advancing technology, and these are just a few of them. We have networks and computing, which includes things like our phones and our computers, but also can be extended to things like virtual reality, artificial intelligence and robotics, which I'll talk a little bit more about in just a minute, rapid manufacturing, digital fabrication, and then finally, digital biology and medicine. All of these fields are following these exact same exponential growth curves. So, back to those devices in our pockets, right? We all know our dear friend Siri. For most of us, Siri, or the equivalent on a Windows device or a Samsung device or an Android device, that was the first artificial intelligence assistant that we really had a chance to interact with. But that technology, the same technology powering those types of systems, is actually doing far more than that today. This is a robot. Her name is Pepper. Has anybody here ever met Pepper? A couple of you? Cool. So Pepper's a pretty cool robot. She's really friendly. She stands about this tall, and she will just roll right up to you and start a conversation. She'll start the conversation in Japanese, but as soon as you answer in a different language, she'll switch automatically. And Pepper is the world's first emotionally intelligent robot. So what does that mean exactly? Right? She's not crying necessarily, but Pepper actually is able to read and sense your emotion based on tonal changes in your voice and the expression on your face. So that if you start talking to Pepper and you're really happy, she can respond appropriately. Or if you start talking to Pepper and you're really sad, she can try to help you and be supportive. So Pepper was developed by a company called Aldebaran Robotics in Japan, and she was actually built for the Japanese mobile phone company SoftBank. She is in SoftBank's mobile phone stores as a concierge to work with customers as they walk into the store. But the vision behind Pepper and this type of robotics is far beyond customer service and a new sales representative. The idea is to build something that can actually provide human interaction with people when humans are not available. So we imagine situations like in nursing homes or in hospitals when you really need to just get a quick check-in with a patient, or you need to understand how somebody is feeling. And what's fascinating is that research done in these fields around artificial intelligence actually shows that humans are more likely to be honest when talking to a robot. And it's because a robot will not judge you. You don't have to worry about what a robot thinks of you because you're actually telling it how you feel. So beyond these robots and technology in our pockets, we also see artificial intelligence powering really phenomenal systems like IBM Watson. Another show of hands, who's heard about IBM Watson? Several of you, right? And IBM Watson's most famous task as one of the most advanced supercomputing systems on Earth, not the most, but one of the most, its greatest task was to beat a human opponent at Jeopardy. And this happened about 5 years ago. The little-known fact behind that Jeopardy success is that the engineers at IBM actually had to down-tune Watson to participate in the game show because they didn't want to terrify the public. Because the fact was, if they had run Watson at its full capacity, it would have answered every single question first in milliseconds. But that idea is frankly a bit scary. So that was 5 years ago. Watson was out there beating people at Jeopardy and winning game shows, right? So what is it doing today? In August of 2016, so about a year ago, Watson was put to the test in a hospital in Japan. And there was a woman who was battling a very rare form of leukemia. She had a panel of doctors who were trying to treat her, and she was not responding to any of the treatments that they were offering. So her doctors, at their wits' end, turned to IBM and they said, hey, do you think we could try to use Watson and see if Watson might be able to help us crack this case? And they said, sure. So in 10 minutes, IBM Watson read and processed 20 million medical journal articles, correctly diagnosed this rare form of leukemia, and recommended a course of treatment and saved the woman's life. In 10 minutes. That was a year ago already. The pace of development of these technologies is absolutely staggering. So as these computing systems become more and more and more powerful, we also suddenly have the capacity to break down complex mysteries that we never used to be able to understand. One of my favorite examples here is it's our own DNA. Sequencing the human genome was this monumental task. It was a $1 billion endeavor that today can be done for about $100. And it's predicted that in a few years, you'll be able to sequence your entire genome for less money than it costs to flush your toilet. So there's a company based in California called 23andMe. And this company was one of the first to actually offer a commercially available DNA sequencing service. Did anybody here have that done by chance, the 23andMe service? A few of us? So what they would do is they would actually have you spit in a tube and mail the tube to their lab, where they would perform DNA sequencing, and they would send you back a report. And that report looked at about 2,000 base pairs of your human DNA. 2,000 base pairs out of 1 billion or so, roughly. A very, very small piece of your DNA being sequenced. And there was a health report and a genetics report and a little bit of information about your ancestry and your demographics that they could provide you. It was powerful. It was cool. For most of us, it was our first time touching our own human code. But today, there's a company called Human Longevity Incorporated based in San Diego that is now sequencing the entire genome and giving you a report on what is called your exome. So this is the 20,000 base pairs in your DNA that actually express something in your body. That other 1 billion or 900 million, 80, whatever, we don't know what it does yet. But the 20,000 base pairs, you can now get those sequenced. I'm actually having this done right now, and they will literally be handing me a flash drive with my entire human genome on it. They told me if they printed it, it would fill an entire room with volumes of cyclopedias. So I'm really glad we have the flash drive instead. So this type of sequencing is cool. It's telling us a lot about our bodies. It's telling us a lot about our health. This up here is a woolly mammoth. It's a woolly mammoth that is 42,000 years old. And it was found in Siberian permafrost by a team of researchers from Harvard, from China, and from Russia. The researchers were able to actually extract the DNA from this woolly mammoth that was frozen in the permafrost for 42,000 years and reanimate it. I was having dinner a couple months ago with one of the people at the firm that's doing this research, and she told me something that was just absolutely fascinating. She said, the thing is, we're trying to bring the woolly mammoth back to life. I said, really? And she said, there's only one problem. We can't find an elephant big enough to impregnate. That's literally the only barrier we have right now. That is where this genetic science has gotten, that the only thing standing in our way from bringing back the woolly mammoth is that our elephants are too small. The power behind this is unbelievable. And with that power and that harnessing of the genome come more phenomenal things for humans. This is news from just a couple of weeks ago that the second gene therapy treatment has been approved for cancer in the United States. This is basically a treatment that turns your own cells in your body into a disease-fighting machine. There are now 2 treatments approved. More incredible yet, researchers are using CRISPR, which is a gene editing software, to delete HIV from mice. Not treat, not cure, not prevent, to delete something from a living organism. You think about the implications of this. If we can delete a disease, what else could we delete? Could we delete learning disabilities? Could we delete any of the other host of challenges that we begin to learn live right inside our own code? So when we think about our bodies, there's a common theme here. We also really love to measure our bodies, right? Another show of hands, who here is wearing a wearable of some sort, right? Tracking your steps, tracking something. I know a bunch of you are lying because I can see them on your wrists, right? We love these things. Fun fact, it's not new, you're not cool. We've been doing this since about 1879 when Tiffany created the first pedometer. And it was actually built for workers who were in mines, and it was built to measure distances. And suddenly people realized, hey, I really like measuring my steps. And it became a fashionable thing to have. And now you fast forward to today, and these are 3 live visualizations of wearables that I actually have, that I use on my body. One of them clips to my belt, and it measures every single breath that I take. I know you're wondering why, right? It tells me if I'm focused, it tells me if I'm nervous, it tells me if I need to stand up and take a break, all based on my breath measurement. The middle one is actually a wearable for my bed that tells me how many times I turn over and monitors my body temperature and my breathing rate and the ambient temperature in the room so that I can try to get better sleep. And the one on the end is actually a bodysuit that I am not wearing now, and I will not show you pictures of because it is really tight. And it actually monitors the activation in every muscle in your body as you exercise to make sure that you're maximizing the way that you're exercising and improving your body. So we're actually getting able to measure all of these different elements of our own health. The sensors that are inside of the phone and the wearables and all of these technologies we use at the same time are powering things like self-driving cars that are now plying our roads all around the world. The very first self-driving car with no human in it actually just went onto a public road in California 2 days ago. Again, this pace is accelerating. And this is one of my favorite examples. What happens with all of these technologies is that they begin to converge. They come together, and when you put them together, when you put together sensors, when you put together rapid manufacturing, when you put together nanotechnology, all of these elements, you begin to have a compounding effect, and you can do really, really phenomenal things. So this picture is of a company called Made in Space. You might guess from the name, they make things in space. And what they did was built the world's first zero-gravity 3D printer. It was built for use on the International Space Station and actually was launched in 2014, so 3 years ago already. In April 2014, this went up to the International Space Station, and it was able to create objects in space. So let's say an astronaut lost a wrench on the space station. Believe it or not, they lose things all the time. Instead of ordering one from NASA and having it shipped up on the next payload, NASA emails them a wrench, and they click a button, and they can print it right there on the space station. But that was version 1 of this technology, launched in 2014. Today, there's a 3rd generation commercial-grade printer that is actually able to take orders from anybody on the planet that wants to have something manufactured in space. And some of the things we actually want to do in space are, for example, hazardous manufacturing processes. It'd be amazing if we could take those off of the planet. Or it's actually possible to make things in space that we can't make here on Earth because of the properties of zero gravity. So for example, one of the things that they're investigating currently is how to make a fiber optic cable with a greater density and quality than anything available on this planet. And you can only do it because you're manufacturing in space. Or there's the deal they just signed with NASA to manufacture humanity's first off-Earth megastructures. They're building a 3D printer that will just orbit the Earth and float in space and continue printing as it goes. And its first project is to build a satellite array that is 1 kilometer across. Like, we could actually make the Death Star. This is possible, right? And these are happening today. These are not what ifs. These are not might we. These are things that are literally happening in the world today. So just to illustrate my point with one more example, I want everybody to take your phone out of your pocket. I know everyone has it, so just take out your phone. Pick it up, come on, there we go. And just give it a little love, okay? Just give it a hug, stroke it a little, don't kiss it, they're really dirty, please. But just love your phone for a second. And while you're doing that, I'm gonna tell you a story. No, get off Tinder, stop, okay. In the 1960s, we decided we wanted to go to space. We wanted to go to the moon as humanity, right? And when that happened, NASA worked with MIT to develop what was called the Apollo Control Module. And at the time, it was designed and described by IBM as the most complex system ever built by man. And it took humans in a metal capsule, and it shot them to the moon, and it landed them there safely, and got them back home. The most complex lines of code ever written. And today, that phone that you are hugging, or you put back in your pocket, that phone is about 32,568 times faster than the Apollo Control Module. It has about 80,000 times the functional memory of the Apollo Control Module. And as a matter of fact, the thumb drive that I used to put my presentation on this computer is faster and more powerful than the Apollo Control Module. That is what exponential change looks like. That is what exponential change feels like. We are all literally rocket scientists. So that's today. When we start thinking about the next decade, the next 2 decades, things get even crazier. So Ray Kurzweil is one of the co-founders of Singularity University. He likes to do this thing where he periodically makes predictions about what's going to come in the next couple of decades. He's been doing this for many years, and to this point, he has an 86% accuracy rate in his predictions. So just keep that one in mind. This is from his most recent set of predictions for what we have to look forward to in the next couple of decades. The first one is the $1,000 human brain. This does not mean you'll be selling your brain for $1,000. This means that you will be able to get a computer that fits in the palm of your hand that has the equivalent processing power of the human brain. That means it can process 10 to the 16th trillion calculations every second. You will hold it in your hand for $1,000. He's predicting an Internet of everything. We've heard of IoT, Internet of Things. His version is the Internet of everything, where it's not just our light bulbs that are connected to the Internet, but it's our clothing embedded with sensors that monitor our health. It's everything in our home talking to one another, so that our devices are interactive and that massive pool of data that we're collecting from our sensors actually begins to mean something. It can be applied, it can be analyzed. This is a world where your toilet will know you are sick before you do. One of his other predictions is that we will live in a world of 8 billion connected humans. And this is a really remarkable idea. We can all sit here in this room with our phones and our computers and know that we're well connected to the internet, but that's still not a majority of people on Earth who can say that. But as these technologies become digitized, become dematerialized, become demonetized, become democratized, they spread across the world much more quickly, and they give this same type of access and the same type of capability to people all over the world. So imagine what that means for business, for governance, for our social structures when 8 billion people can talk to each other and have access to the same information. So that's where we are today. We're at the knee of the curve. And I want to ask, does anybody in the room feel a little bit like this? Only one, wow, okay. Right, it can be a little scary to be at this point. And it's because this curve that we're on, that people might like to call techno-optimism, it's branching from what we think of as reality. We as humans are hardwired to think about a linear future. We expect the future to be better, but only a little bit better than yesterday. It's the way that we were built to survive. But today, that's just not the fact. That's not the case. The world is advancing at a pace that we have not been prepared for. So what happens at that point, at that breaking point between reality and techno-optimism, is massive disruption. It's where everything in our world starts to break down a little bit. The hard fact here is that today is the slowest day of the rest of your life. Today is the slowest day of the rest of your life. Instead of thinking about that as disruption, though, I prefer to think about this as an opportunity. And I think you will too, because we're in a room of all optimists. What we have an opportunity for at this point is a human revolution, where it isn't just technology advancing at this rate, but we ourselves can begin to advance and develop and change. When we think about the way technology allows us to communicate so differently, with instant translation from Google, or emoji to tell anybody exactly how you feel. It changes the way that we learn, where schools don't need to look like this anymore. We don't need to push information to others in specific places because we have these incredible resources where literally every ounce of information possessed by humanity is at your fingertips. It's this world where we can teleport ourselves through virtual reality to a multi-million-dollar scientific research lab without ever leaving home. It's a world where the jobs that we have will begin to change because technology and robots and computers do a lot of things better than humans. And we will no longer need to do the jobs that are dirty and dangerous and repetitive. We'll be able to tap into what matters to us, our passions, our strengths, our interests, and align those with the needs and opportunities in the world. I'm guessing there are a lot of parents out here right now, and I'm curious, have you ever told one of your kids, or maybe a nephew or a niece, or just a friend, have you ever told them that they should be either a doctor, an accountant, or a pharmacist? Anyone? You're lying. Yeah, because you know what's coming already, see? Those are the top 3 careers most likely to be disrupted in the next 5 years. What we've once thought of as reliable, consistent, good, solid careers are changing every single day, and we need to make sure that we are preparing for that. This is also going to be a revolution in the way that we structure ourselves as a society, the way that we live as a people. I have a pop quiz for you on geography. What are the 3 largest countries in the world by population? Who can tell me number 1? China, beautiful. Number 2? India. Number 3? Number 3 always gets people. Number 3 is the United States. Okay, so China, India, the United States. Here we go. Top 3 largest countries on Earth. I have to make an argument that this is completely incorrect. There are 2 more that we're missing. These are Facebook and Twitter, right? I know somebody out here right now is thinking, Brett, Facebook is a social network, right? Okay, you're right, but just hear me out. What is it that unites a nation? What is it that defines a nation? It is common language, culture, norms. We all know what it means to like. We all know what it means to poke. We all know what it means to Facebook. It's become a verb, right? We have a common language. We have a common culture. We have common norms. Common currency platform. Any one of those, it's actually 2 billion people now on Facebook, can send money directly to another one of those 2 billion people, the click of a button. You have common governance. Every one of us adheres to the exact same terms and conditions when we sign up for Facebook. We are part of the same government. We all have common security, right? There's an army of digital security people at Facebook protecting every one of those 2 billion citizens of the Facebook nation. Even things like national pride. When we think about disasters happening around the world, right? And people go onto Facebook and they change their profile picture to have the flag over the front of it. But they've never been there, they don't speak the language, they don't even like the food. But they want to be there in solidarity with another person because they identify with their fellow citizens of that nation. And the thing is, these entities are actually starting to operate as nations. They're starting to do the things that nations were once only able to do. So for example, April 7th, 2009 in Chisinau, Moldova was the world's first Twitter rebellion. This was started by 3 people who decided to get some friends together in the central square of Chisinau because they weren't happy with the government. It led to 50,000 people coming out and eventually led to a referendum on the government, and later that year, new power was installed. Kathmandu, Nepal, in April 2015, a devastating earthquake struck. Countries all around the world raced to their aid and said, we want to help, we want to help. The United States, USAID, the EU coughed up $10 million, $3 million within days. But by the end of that first week after the disaster, who do you think was the #1 contributor? You know it. Facebook. And this was not just a rich corporation handing over cash, this was driven by individual contributions from the citizens of Facebook, from all of us as individuals contributing and making a decision about what our nation would do. In fact, at the end of the day, only one entity was able to beat Facebook, and that was the whole world. Literally the whole world combined was the only one to best them. So this is our new flag. You should just know. It'll be waving there really soon. But the point this brings me to is I'm not a good magician. There we go. Is that this revolution that we have an opportunity to see in our world is not just one of disruption. It's not just one of that screaming face emoji. It's a revolution in the way that we're going to live, and that we have this amazing opportunity because we are a people who have power and access that is completely unprecedented. We are people who can begin to be driven by purpose because we have the freedom to replace all of those rote tasks with the technology we're developing. And we're a people that is beginning to really live together. So there's this principle in computer science, and it reads like this: when a component in a system changes by an order of magnitude, it often necessitates a redesign of the fundamental building blocks of that system. I know it's a lot of words, right? So when a component in a system changes by an order of magnitude, we have that. We have all of these components changing by orders of magnitude. It often necessitates a redesign of the fundamentals of that system. So what I want you to do the rest of today and tomorrow, and as you go back to your lives and your work, doing great things in the world, I want you to imagine how you want to act in this future. And I want you to imagine what your fundamental building blocks are. What are the pieces of your organization? What are the pieces of your mission? What are the pieces of your life that might just need to be redesigned a little bit to take advantage of what we have, to take advantage of this future? I see this future where we have every ounce of humanity's knowledge available at our fingertips, where the definitions of communities and nations are literally changing by the day, where issues that once divided us can actually become the issues that unite us. And where technology is not at all a panacea, but rather technology is a tool. Technology is a tool for NGOs to do their work more effectively and in new ways. It's a tool for governments to be more efficient and transparent. And it's a tool for people. It's a tool for you, it's a tool for me, it's a tool for 7.5 billion of our closest friends to be that cure-all ourselves. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Brett. Following our previous format, we're going to have a small discussion followed by questions. Thank you, this was fantastic. I feel that I most likely am not the only one feeling like this right now, right? That emoji face. And I think this is what the singularity is about restoring that sense of wonder, that conviction of hope that better times are possible, and that there's data demonstrating that humanity has never been before, in spite of so much conflict that we still cannot believe that this generation is undergoing. The facts are right now against us, Brett, in El Salvador. According to The Economist, we are the murder capital of the world. According to the United Nations Office on Latin America, CEPAL, we have the highest rates of violence against women in all of Latin America here in El Salvador. And according to the World Economic Forum, we have also started going backwards in terms of achieving gender parity in El Salvador. There is less political participation and representation at all levels of society. So these are pretty negative indicators. On top of that, a recent survey of one of the major newspapers tells us that almost 89% of youngsters between the ages of 17 and 19 wish to leave the country, should they have the opportunity. And this hurricane of pessimism obviously affects the way we construct a future, because we cannot build a future here if we do not believe that there is one. So your presentation comes, I believe, at an inflection point in El Salvador, and we're kind of preaching to the choir, because everyone who is in this room is committed, is convinced that this country is worth it. We have people here that in spite of civil war and natural disasters, they've decided to stay here because they're committed. So, but singularity and this world of abundance is telling us that in the next 5 years, we're going to see all these sorts of disruptive innovations that they supposedly promise to dramatically transform all these indicators that I mentioned before. Now, what is our homework? Is it going to be an automatic? Do we need to prepare our institutions, our citizens, our schools? What should be our blueprint from here until we see many of these innovations that you have described that are massively distributed and amplified in order to really transform? Or will the bridge become even deeper?
That was a really small question.
And you have to answer in one tweet.
All right, one tweet. So,
Just kidding.
I mean, obviously, if I had the answer to that, that would be great. Nobody really has an answer to how we overcome that. I think that it's extremely important to recognize that as much as we love to believe technology really will be this incredibly powerful tool, that ultimately it comes down to the people using it. And if we aren't able to heal some of those wounds and divisions between us, then it won't be that successful. It's not going to be this wonderful thing that we expect. So I think I kind of have two answers to this. One is that we need to start with education. I think that's absolutely critical. Education is something that I'm extremely passionate about, and I've spent a lot of time working in. And I think ultimately, when we want this change to happen, it has to happen with the next generation. There are just too many factors in changing people's minds once they're already set that makes it extremely difficult. So I think education that teaches global mindsets, that teaches an awareness of what's going on in the world right now is extremely critical. I don't think we should be teaching technology. That's something I see all the time, that should be the answer. Let's teach kids how to code. Let's teach kids how to do this. I don't agree with that. I think that we need to teach about what's happening in the world, where we're moving, and help young people be able to figure out where they really fit.
Why shouldn't we teach technology?
It's not necessarily that we shouldn't, but that generally when I've seen it done, I feel the technology is what we lead with rather than leading with the problem that it can solve. So if we can develop a mindset that is critical and understanding the ethical and moral implications of this change we're going through and can really find the specific place that they want to make an impact in it, then you pick up the technology. Only then do you pick it up as a tool to actually achieve that end.
I would like this session to be as interactive as possible, so I would love to see those questions coming as we have a few more minutes. Can we please have the first question? Nico, and followed by Joaquin.
Could you elaborate a little more on the demonetization?
Sorry?
Demonetization?
Yeah, so the question is, could I elaborate on demonetization? I'm not sure what detail you're looking for necessarily, but essentially what this phase in this trend of disruption looks like is that as an object becomes digitized and dematerialized, so as a physical product becomes digital, and then as its being becomes something that no longer exists. My favorite example here just is a camera, right? Where a camera used to produce a photograph, and it came out on paper. That was digitized. The paper became digital. It's now a file. And then it was dematerialized, so the camera itself is no longer a thing that we have. It's built into another device. It's right inside of here. What happens after digitization and dematerialization is that the cost comes down significantly, so that now it's to the point where every one of us has a camera in our pocket, where it used to be something that was exclusively for those who could afford it. And everybody can be their armchair photographer on Instagram by putting a filter on things. So that's a very simple example, but that's the general trend that gets you to that demonetization point. You could say the same thing with, for example, Skype did this with long distance calling, and iTunes did this with music, where it really brings the price point down.
Just as a reminder, we're also taking questions in Spanish that will be translated. And please state your name and the organization you represent. I think we have Joaquin over here. With a microphone.
If we want to keep up and not be on the order receiving side of the computer, but on the order giving side?
There are two questions inside of that, I feel, actually. There's one about education and one about computers telling us what to do. So in terms of education and critical thinking, in case anybody didn't hear, the question is about how I feel about integration of critical thinking into learning. I think it's obviously, first and foremost, it's what we need to make sure that people can do. When we think about what really is a unique human skill as we move forward, when we're looking at the trends in job disruption and how technology is really replacing things, what's being replaced is a lot of jobs that involve analysis, jobs that involve repetition, routine, anything that's very predictable. So we think about jobs in accounting as an example. That's number one because a computer can do better math than us. Driving is going to be better because a computer can analyze more variables around us than a human because we only have two eyes and they only point one way. So that's the type of job that is really going to be rapidly replaced. When we think about what's uniquely human, you think about the skills like communication, compassion, creativity, the 4 C's, if you are into that jargon, and that's what we have to emphasize. It's the things that today a computer can't do. There are actually people who argue that a computer will be able to be just as creative as a human within 20 years. So there may be a new discussion that we have to have in a couple of decades. But at the inflection point we see today, it's about really developing those human interpersonal skills. So critical thinking is definitely key to that. And I can just say a little bit kind of about my experience working in this. One of the projects I'm working on right now is in the UAE, and we're working with a private school system there to build a curriculum. It's called the Global Futures Curriculum, and it's a full experience for 2 years of high school that really prepares students to start thinking about this future. And not just think about it, but be ready for it, actually chart a path to get there. Some of the tools that we use are like science fiction. as a tool for predicting a future and actually envisioning what you're going to move toward, and then a lot of like life mapping sort of to get you there. So we're trying to instill in these younger people real critical analysis of what could come and how to prepare for it.
We have a question in the back from Diego.
My name is Diego Quiñones. I'm a director at the Fundación Rafael Mesayao. My question, Brett, or more like, could you elaborate on the idea of collaboration in regards to reaching these goals? Because I do feel that we're in a phase of transformation where organizations were based on having a competitive advantage based on scarcity, and now moving towards a world of abundance where collaboration actually helps you achieve those goals more efficiently.
Yes, you're absolutely right. When we think about the way companies are being disrupted, I think that what we're finding is that not only is there a transition from this scarcity to abundance mindset, but there's a transition from an approach to success that is about how you produce something to success being what you produce. So where a lot of the factors involved in a company's success would be how good its product was, or how much longer it lasted, or what material it might have been made of, something like that. Now it's moving more into what is the feeling that it evokes from people. And that's really what's going to kind of be your ticket. So what happens is that in a traditional organization, we tend to have a deficit of people that are from an outside sphere. And true innovation comes at the intersections of disparate ideas. So when you want to talk about collaboration, I think it's critical to an organization really innovating is bringing in people that are from outside that ecosystem, that might be an uncommon collaborator, and making sure that they're at the table. I can speak for the approach that we use at Singularity University. So my job there is as the director of Impact, and it doesn't really mean a lot as a title, right? But I work with our entire global community, so 150,000 people in 127 countries. And a huge part of my job is to figure out how to bring together those disparate groups of people and actually have them working on solutions together. So for us, we have a theory of 6 different pieces of that puzzle, right? We have to have corporations, we have to have startups, we have to have academia, governments, funders, and NGOs. And if we can get all of those 6 different players working together, they can each bring their own piece of the pie. So the best stories that we have to tell of like impact really happening in the world is where you very successfully bring in somebody from each one of those different parallels.
Naomi?
Hi, Naomi Hernandez, and I'm representing the Global Shapers. Brett, I cannot help to be very excited listening to your presentation and seeing all this technology and knowing about it. But I definitely also cannot disregard the fact that our indicators are telling us that El Salvador is actually going backwards. And so I also cannot left behind my sense of patriotism and my sense of national pride. And so I feel like for us, it will be more of like a cultural change that we will need, because first we need to actually believe and realize that that there's nothing like a gene that people in other countries have and that we Salvadorians don't have, and that we cannot solve our problems. And also not wait to get a solution from somebody else, but actually, start creating them here. So I feel like it's more of a cultural change, because we still don't believe it as a nation. So as far as intentional cultural change using technologies, can you comment on that?
Wow, that's a really good question. I don't know if I have any fantastic example of useful cultural change driven by technology. There's unquestionable cultural change driven by technology. Even going back to some of the examples that I referenced, the way that social media platforms and things like that have transformed culture regardless of where you are. But I think that I think there's a really common disconnect when we talk about how technology is changing the world, and it's a perception that it only exists in certain places, and that it's very easy to fly in from San Francisco and be like, look at these fun toys, right? Because they're there and they're accessible. I disagree with that in some ways. I acknowledge the point, and I think it deserves to be honored because it's a fact of the way that our world is structured at the moment. But I believe that the reality is a lot of these technologies are just toys in the places where they're being developed, but they are actually extremely powerful. So in my mind, if you actually want to find the way to bridge that gap, you have to find the way to make it locally relevant. You have to, if you have a small community you're working with and they seem resistant to the idea of working with a technology or resistant to this change, find the story inside of it that actually hits home for them. Find the one example of a way that you can bring a tool in and really transform something for them. And when that can happen, the cultural attitude can begin to shift. And that applies to anybody. This is not about only communities that are low income or anything. This is no matter where you go. This is when I talk to my parents who live quite far removed from Silicon Valley, I need to make it relevant to them. So if I talk about 3D printing limbs, right? That's something that's very strange and far off to them. But if I tell my mom that a doctor in Wisconsin, where she lives, just 3D printed a hip and installed it for an elderly patient, she's like, sweet, can I have his name? You know, you have to find the way to make it personal.
Thank you. Edwin?
Hey, Brett. So my question is, what would you recommend to us, to the audience here, about, especially in the NGO sector? You know, people have tools that they use every day and that are very effective. So when you come and talk about all these new technologies that are very interesting, but what would you say about why we should use them and why we should, you know, invest the effort in learning about and maybe experimenting in a small way so that NGOs can have a greater impact?
I mean, in some way, I would just say, why not? You know, if somebody could actually give me a really compelling reason, why not to learn about what is factually going to happen in the next year, I would love to hear it. And I think that there comes a point where, I mean, you can answer this crassly, which is the version of like, you know, the definition of insanity is doing this thing the same way and expecting different results. But I think on the other side is everybody in this room really truly wants the best for the communities that we work for. There's no question about that. And interrupt, go ahead.
I guess my question is more of how can people like embrace it as part of their workflow, like kind of like a Skunk Works maybe, or as you know, supporting like a startup or
Yep, so that would be my recommendation, is collaborate. I think that most NGOs, and I come from a background working in NGOs myself for a long time, most NGOs do not have the budgets to be investing in really fancy technology. They do not have the additional human resources to be dedicating to this. So it's back to the point about collaboration. There are fantastic startups right here in El Salvador. There are people who are actually actively working in entrepreneurship and would be happy to come in and host a session with your organization and help your staffs understand what's coming and understand technologies. And I think that if we can do that, if you can bring all those people to one table, you can much more effectively tackle the issue.
We have time for one or two last questions. Or Carla has a special announcement? No?
Yeah, I was just gonna, thank you so much. I'm Carla Meyer from the Fundación Rafael Mesayao. I have a more personal question, but it can maybe apply to all the kids around there and those of us who are young parents. I have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. And I often seem overwhelmed, but I love this topic and technology in general, but I feel overwhelmed as to how to guide, and I know you talked about this at the beginning, but as to how to guide and what to expose my kids to. You know, sometimes I feel like, no iPad, or no, or yes iPad, or please learn coding at 5, or don't do, like, what is your take on that? Or your advice?
I don't have input on the iPad, no iPad debate. No. I don't think it's a bad thing. You know, I think exposure to technology is really important. And I think that kids, I mean, you can see when you hand a kid an iPad, you can hand a 1-year-old an iPad and they know what to do, right? It's a very intuitive human thing to use. And I believe that technology is in some way inseparable from us, right? It's what we develop, and this is us right now, and there's no problem in engaging with that. What I would say, though, to any young parent, to any parent, frankly, is when you're talking to your kids about the future, make sure that you're asking the right questions. And it takes work. I'm not going to lie. It takes work to understand how to guide them, because you yourself need to be aware of some of the opportunities that are out there. But the world is your oyster to some extent, where we can learn anything we want by Googling it and finding it on YouTube. And exposing kids to those different resources is really important. The question I think that we really need to ask, and I'll introduce this with a bit of a story, right? So the story is a good friend of mine, his name is Dennis. He was telling me how when he had just graduated high school, he wasn't really entirely sure what he wanted to do with his life, and he was working at a Starbucks as a barista. And every day, all of these busy people would come in, and he would hand them their latte with no soy whipped foam or whatever, right? And they'd go off and do their busy day, and the next day they'd come in again, and he would just hand them the coffee again. And he said he got extremely frustrated because he was just enabling all of these people. That was all he did in his life, is he sat there and he enabled other people to go do really incredible things. And then one day, he had this realization that every single one of those people was enabling another person, and that this was just his role in enablement, because frankly, if someone's going to pay you, you better be enabling something, right? So the question that I think of today is what do you want to enable in your future? This is what I would ask my kids. What do you want to enable? The things that will need to be enabled are changing. The things that we can enable are changing, but that's, to me, the starting point. And if that means maybe your kid is a passionate artist and says, I want to enable people to feel really strong emotions from art, it's fantastic. Then we help guide them and understand what that career could mean. So to build on the art example, who was the highest paid person at Apple prior to Tim Cook taking the reins? It was Johnny Ive, the head of design, right? An artist. And he was there because he made people feel things with the devices that they had. So rather than telling kids, no, the thing that you want to do in life, the thing you're passionate about, it doesn't matter because it's not a career, I think we need to find ways to reshape that and to find those passions, those strengths, and those interests, and help our kids actually align them with the needs and opportunities that are out there.
And our final question.
Hello, my name is Camila, and first of all, thank you for being here. I love your presentation. It was very distinctive and engaging. And my question relates a little bit to the last question, but more in a global sense. So most of the times when we talk about development, innovation, and technology, we associate this to progress, right? But not that I want to add to the hurricane of pessimists, but nowadays economists are also talking about the elixir, right? What is the elixir of education, the phenomena that, as more people become educated, ironically, the cost of education goes down. Or the elixir of development, where, nations reach a level of development, they become so industrial, societies become fragmented, their relationship, with the environment is also broken, or countries like Switzerland, that they're considerably relatively stable in terms of their political systems and their economies, yet suicide is the #1 reason of death among young people, right? So I wanted to ask you, what do you consider is the elixir of innovation technology? How could this be prevented? And in a positive sense, how can technology be used to solve the global political, economic, social, environmental issues, from climate change and global warming to the refugee crisis and migration?
Again, a very small question. It's a great question, and I think that the period we're in right now, in this kind of frightening knee of the curve, things are getting crazy and not what we expect. To be completely honest, I think that we have several difficult years ahead of us as humanity. And it's a time when we'll be answering those questions. We'll be asking them first and then answering them. Because in every innovation is a new problem, first of all. And in every innovation, there is a host of ethical debates and moral debates to be had. And every one of those things feeds right back into politics and all of these major issues we have. So I don't, it's kind of going back to what I said, that I don't believe technology is the panacea. I don't believe it's the cure-all. I think it's that we in our communities need to organize around a vision for where we want to be. If I look at politics today, if I look at most of these issues, I find that generally they're problem-focused. They're focused on what you want to fix or what you want to solve or how you want to do something differently. And I believe what we actually need to do as a society, and given these tools, I think we actually can do this right now, is come together around objectives. Rather than how do we solve the climate change, how do we provide clean air and water for our children? You know, and it's small, simple, just cognitive linguistics, right? It's just about the way that we frame things, and I believe we'll be able to find much more effective applications for technology and much more effective ways to operate. But it's a purely human thing, and it's just something that I believe we need to do in our society, in our communities, in our homes, in our neighborhoods.
Brett, on behalf of the foundation, we thank you so much for making your way here, all the way from San Francisco. Thank you so much.